Crypto markets primed for a level playing field. Is change coming? Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, and the Gold and Silver Standard as the Ainslie Group celebrates 50 years. Today, we welcome back Matt, who's been continuing with his ongoing research into the changing regulatory landscape for crypto and what he thinks we can expect next. How are you going today, Matt?
I'm great, Tipper. How are you?
I'm good. Now, you wrote this article earlier in the week, but you've been looking at this ongoing, and it's something you talk about all the time. You talk to us in the office about it all the time. There's a lot going on in the space around the regulation and the big players in the space, what they're doing, what they're not doing. Some really good points that you raised in the article this week. Let's start by digging into something specifically, which was the policies from the Biden administration, because you've looked at that a bit, and there's been a bit of turbulence in crypto that probably could be contributed to the stakeholders attached to that. So do you want to start us off by talking about that?
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's an evolving landscape. The the actions of the Biden administration over the last 4 years, roughly 4 years, has really been one that has basically solidified power into people's hands, such as the Elizabeth Warrens of the financial Senate Financial Committee and other players such as Gary Gensler in the with the SEC. And with those parties in play, they have caused a landscape of confusion. They've created a landscape of false narratives, and they've created also a landscape by which crypto companies and the crypto industry don't know the rules of the road. In some respects, they're saying that they're living in purgatory. I mean, if you're traveling down a road and you don't know the speed, and you've got the cop on the right there zapping you and saying, oh, you're speeding. If there's no signs, how do you know? So that's what they've been crying out for. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has been very lax and very slow moving in its approach to crypto regulation, something specific, defined, that the players know the rules and they can operate by those rules. So yeah, it's been a difficult 3 to 4 years with the Biden administration in power.
And it hasn't just been, I mean, I know we've experienced similar here, the idea in Australia that we're not exactly sure what the rules are. You've sort of got the promise that there's regulation on the horizon, but it doesn't necessarily, it takes a very long time to come through. And to be fair to the political parties involved or the political process involved in that, there's often a lot of discussion and back and forth engagement that goes on, but it still makes it very difficult to operate in that space when you don't have a clear rule book. I mean, it's a really good point. You make the analogy to driving down the road. You don't know if you're doing the wrong thing. And more importantly, for businesses in the space, they don't know if they're going to be seen as doing the wrong thing in the future based on what they're doing today when it's unclear.
Yeah, which is the kind of the gotcha moment that no one wants to live by. And unfortunately, in relation to the SEC in the US, this is something they've been relying on. Now, why do they do that? Is it protectionism? Is it part of their business model? We're not sure. There have been cases there where they've gone in and completely bankrupted legitimate businesses, or threatened businesses with some, with Wells notices or with legal proceedings, and that just costs the business so much money and sends them broke, or they have to settle. And then in the case of Kraken, they'd settled, and this had to come back, and it came back a couple of years later, or a year later, trying for another bite at the cherry. So there are some practices and procedures here which really are not giving confidence to the industry to be able to say, okay, I can clearly put my feet down here on a stable platform. It kind of feels like it's being kept moving and unstable, kind of like quicksand. I mean, hoping that someone will not be able to get traction. Now that poses another thought. Well, why does the administration or the incumbents not want these businesses to get traction? Is it because it will replace them? Is it because they're going to lose market share? We could even possibly talk about things like hegemony of the US dollar in its role moving forward with disruptive technology such as blockchain and being able to move value around the world and settle and not have to have reserves of the US dollar. There's many cross currents where you could really kind of dive into, but needless to say, the government, the US government, just has not been on the front foot and provided any direction And anything that they have done, unfortunately, with regards to the likes of Elizabeth Warren, has been false narratives, fear, and trying to drive businesses offshore.
And it's a real problem for the US when they're looking at it that way. But as I was alluding to before, it's a problem for the rest of the world as well, because ultimately governments around the world tend to follow the US's lead on this, particularly if we're talking about innovation, we're talking about investment. People aren't prepared to make those steps if they don't have clarity from the US, because you do it domestically, and then if the rules are different over there, it creates problems with the international trade. So all of that is a big problem where it currently stands. But you raise the issue in the article that we've potentially got a change of administration coming. And if you looked at the odds today, it would be a landslide victory to the Republicans, to Trump as a new president.
Yes.
Lots can happen between now and election day. But can you maybe talk us through a little bit more about what the consequences are here? Because Trump has come out endorsing cryptocurrency quite directly, saying that, under his watch, you will have right to self-custody, all of those things. And he's headlining that upcoming Bitcoin conference. It's a massive deal, really, to think that you've got someone that's potentially the next president of the United States, and I believe even his vice president pick as well, who are very pro-crypto. What's your take on the political landscape and the future under a potential Trump presidency?
Yeah, I'd go back to your point about the rest of the world taking the lead from the US, and to a degree that is true. To another degree, a lot of the rest of the world have actually moved on with legislation and regulations and so forth, them in place, so that the rules of the road are known. So companies are moving overseas, like we might have discussed a couple of weeks ago. But with regards to Trump and his pro-crypto stance, you've got a voter base there of somewhere between, I think last year it was about 30% of Americans had exposure or knowledge of crypto. That's now up to 40%. Within Australia, it's 25%. So that's 1 in every 4 Australians. So that's a voter base you cannot ignore. You have to address it. It is a significant issue, and people have been screaming out for this is an issue for ages. And I think now it's just starting to galvanize, and they're starting to realize that this is a large voter base that is very interested in technology moving forward. And the problem also is well, not the problem, the concern is that never before has there been bipartisanship when it comes to technology and advancement. There's never been a left or a right for something to progress as far as a human race and technology. Why is it now? Many questions could be asked on that, but yes, you're right. DJ Vance, I think, is the possible VP he's looking at, and he's in his letting Congress know of his holdings as part of their legislation and laws. Has a significant amount of crypto himself. Trump is coming around. There's even been whispers of a Treasury Secretary replacement at some stage involving Jamie Dimon, who's magically changed his stance on Bitcoin recently. Personally, I would probably like someone more like Brian Brooks, who's a very intelligent man, who's formerly of Coinbase, who was the office of the comptroller of the currency. A much better pick, I think, just in my opinion and from my research. I think he's a very level-headed man. He understands technology moving forward. But if the Trump administration is able to come in, I think that you would see a rather fast-paced rollout of such things as legislation that's been proposed or bills that have been proposed and put on the back burner. So things like the Token Taxonomy Act, the stablecoin legislations, all those sorts of things would come to the fore. And I think he would push that through and Congress would get working. But that's been a problem. They just haven't been working on it. As I said before, the likes of Elizabeth Warren are sitting there and actually, having Senate inquiries and talking to the Genslers, and she's giving him the answers and the questions to what she's supposed to be holding him accountable for. I mean, that's where. Is it any wonder the US citizenry are losing faith in their government and their representatives? No, it's not a surprise, and unfortunately, that has reverberations.
It certainly does, and I wonder. So I was just sort of thinking as you're talking through that, is there the flip side? Let's say that potentially Biden steps out of the race, and I mean from what looks to be unfolding, and you never know in this environment, but what looks to be unfolding, it could be as soon as this weekend.
Yeah.
The odds have certainly blown out very quickly today. So there's something going on there because the markets are sniffing it out. If you get someone else in potentially for the Democrats, seeing the point that you made before, that it is such a significant part of the voter base, is it possible that we see both sides really becoming a little bit more bipartisan on this, that you see policies potentially coming out from the Democrats as well that are more pro-crypto if it goes that way and we do end up with a much tighter race than what it looks like at the moment?
Well, you're starting to see a little bit of movement from the Democratic side. Obviously, they're taking their lead from their leadership. Let's not forget that Elizabeth Warren was in a presidential race back when Biden was going, prior to Trump, I think she dropped out. And the sweetener was to get that the Senate Finance Committee position. So she wields a lot of power in behind. But I do notice that there's quite a few of the Democrats in the numbers of recent votes that have moved across the aisle and are now voting with sensibility of technology moving forward, obviously in a safe way. We don't want to propose to just make legislation for legislation's sake. There has to be good legislation, but there just has to be some legislation. Even if it's slightly poor, you can adjust that down the road a little bit if you need to. There's always got to be some wiggle room with fine tuning. But I've noticed that the Democrats are now moving across. Perhaps these local senators or congressmen are starting to hear from their constituents that, hey, this is an issue. And they're going, right, well, even if I are being told by the hierarchy, they're starting to move across. And we saw that recently in the SARB 121 vote, where that made its way through the lower house the House of Representatives of America. It went through to the Senate, it made it through, but then got to Biden, who vetoed it. It was quite surprising that he did that. I wouldn't have thought that he did, but he did. It's gone back down to the lower house, which is a procedural thing that probably they knew. And then in the lower house, those votes haven't come through. But there is a groundswell, and it is an interest that a lot of people are taking on as far as a investment opportunity, but also a political opportunity. And if the politicians are not looking out for this momentum, well, they could get washed away.
Well, it certainly seems like there's something changing. The tides are changing there, and we'll continue to watch it. I mean, this is great having you on. We'll try and do this fairly regularly, hopefully about weekly, getting that crypto sort of view on what's going on as well, because it is a big part of the future. You can see that happening, and you can see it happening at this regulatory level. So thank you so much for your work on that and your continued work on it. We appreciate that, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks, man.
You're welcome, Tipper. See you soon.
See you soon. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll chat again soon.